The patients sometimes have symptoms and everything's normal and not enough to explain how severe and unwell people feel. Tell us how that applies in your world.
The number one diagnosis in gastroenterology is irritable bowel syndrome. About 20% of America has this condition, and it turns out to be celiac disease,
Sure.
or it turns out to be sucrase intolerance.
Fair.
And so there's these other things that can exist. So we have to call it a diagnosis of exclusion, which is
Yeah.
to get to it, you have to do appropriate testing to rule out the other possibilities.
Welcome to the Medical Disruptor, a place where you can ask the hard questions and get evidence-based answers you won't find anywhere else. Our community is always informed, empowered, and science-backed. Every guest on the show must be clinically trained, MDs, NPs, PAs, and researchers who want more and expand beyond their conventional education to find deeper answers. I'm Dr. E, the MP with a PhD, and I help smart, well-versed women go from medically gaslit to medically empowered. Today's guest, Dr. Will B. I'm going to let him pronounce the name as soon as we start. New York Times bestselling author, and he's about to launch his second book, was classically trained, top of his class. You're going to hear all about that. And then he got sick. And like a true medical disruptor, he walked away from all of it and started helping patients in a brand new way because of what he experienced. He focuses on patient patterns even when the standard GI testing comes back completely normal. We're going to talk about IBS. Boy, are we going to talk about IBS. You're going to love his take on it. We're going to talk about how medical training creates blind spots even after years of being in school. If you're looking for science-backed strategies that go way beyond standard protocols, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Dr. B, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Of course. So now the first thing I have to do is help me pronounce your name.
Yes. Okay, cool. Well, the problem is that it's a Polish last name. And if you were in Poland, it wouldn't be that big of a deal because it kind of rolls off the tongue. Like, so in Poland, they say Bulsiewicz.
Okay, Bulsiewicz.
But, it was like my great-grandparents who came to the United States. So in the 4 generations since, we Americanized our name, and we say Bulsiewicz. So Bulsiewicz. But this is why, Dr. E, this is why everyone calls me Dr. B.
I can't relate as Dr. E of
Yeah.
having a difficult foreign name. So, all right, Dr. E to Dr. B. So the first part of all of our episodes is just kind of getting to know you and how you became a medical disruptor. So walk us through your training and then what made you jump over to the other side or include the other side.
Yeah. So, so from my perspective, my lifelong dream, truly, my lifelong dream was to be a medical doctor. And this is something that, literally every cell in my body was working towards from a very young age. So I went to Vanderbilt for undergrad. I was pre-med. That was crazy. weed out classes, 85% of people don't make it.
Yep.
And then I went to Georgetown for medical school. It was my dream school. I'm still paying the loans off for that one. Could have gone to a state school and saved a lot of money, but
No,
nonetheless.
you can't reason with a 25-year-old about like these things.
Yeah, I guess, I was following my dream. And look, here I am, and I'm happy with where I am. So
Yeah.
how can you complain? And then I got my first choice residency, which was Northwestern in Chicago. I ended up being the chief medical resident there. That's really truly at 26 years old in Chicago. That's where I really turned a corner and turned into the person that I am today.
Wow.
On many levels. I was the intern of the year, which is the highest award. Like basically out of 60 doctors, they gave me the highest award. These are incredible people.
Yeah, this is a
Like
big
these are the
deal.
leaders. Yeah,
Yeah.
this was a huge deal. And then I went to the University of North Carolina because I wanted to study at the School of Public Health. And it's sometimes it's number one, sometimes it's number two, but bottom line, the University of North Carolina has an incredible School of Public Health. I was on a grant from the NIH there, and I was like positioning myself to be a combination, like we call it a triple threat, which is where you are a clinician, you are a teacher, and you are also a researcher. And so I was positioning myself to be a leader in this field as a gastroenterologist. And the problem was that I became sick.
Oh, this is so good. What
Yeah.
happened?
Well, so the hospital
Not good that you were
consumed.
sick. You know what I mean. For the story, it's good.
In hindsight, it is good that I was sick,
Mm,
honestly. Like bad things happen in your life, and then there's like really great things that come out of that. And in
love
the
that.
moment, you can't see that, right?
Yeah.
So you can't see that until you're like 10, 15 years later. And then you look back and
100%.
you're like, oh, dang, that was like, I actually needed that.
I needed that kick in the face.
Yeah. So the hospital chewed me up. And, I was working in the hospital itself, 80 hours a week, sometimes more than that. But then like I had all these side projects where like in order to
Be a triple
fulfill,
threat.
yeah, if you want to be a researcher, like research doesn't get done while you're in the hospital working, it gets done outside the hospital. So then I had to do that work outside. And so I was just like grinding it so hard. I had no time. And when I did have time, I just wanted to feel good.
Yeah.
So basically that meant like junky food and an unhealthy lifestyle.
Yeah,
And
it's not possible to do all that and also cut your salad and roast your chicken. It's not
yeah,
possible.
well, and the thing about it is it's also not prioritized in
Correct.
the way that the system is constructed, right? I mean,
And
the number one cause of death for cardiologists is heart disease.
yeah, it's not prioritized in the lifestyle, but it's also not prioritized in the curriculum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not none of the above, right? So we just don't acknowledge that even exists.
Correct.
So in this moment, to paint the picture, I was 50 pounds overweight, which is hard for me because like I'm a high school athlete. I was the captain of 2 teams in high school. I played 3 sports. I looked in the mirror and I was like,
Who are you?
that gut, yeah, who are you? Like that gut is sagging over the belt.
Wow.
And I was depressed, truly. Like the world came at me in shades of gray. I was anxious. I had extremely low self-esteem. I was metabolically out of balance. And so in that sort of dark moment, like I knew, okay, I need help.
Yeah.
And if I go to what I am myself, like if I go to myself, it's going to be 5 different pills for 5 different problems.
100%.
And I didn't actually want that.
So you already realized that in the moment that turning to yourself or to your colleagues would not give you the result you wanted.
I think that like you enter into this journey that like for me, medical school started in 2002 and now we're talking about 2012. So I'm 10 years into this journey
Yes.
and you basically are being fed this curriculum by people that you respect and you view them in a godlike way.
Smart people.
Highly intelligent people, right? And you get fed this and you never sort of stop to question, is this everything that exists? Is this everything that's necessary? You assume that like these great institutions and these great doctors at these institutions are giving you the absolute best stuff that exists.
Yeah. Not
And
only do you assume that, if I may, but you're also taught, I come from your type of training. You're also taught that anything else is a little bit wacky.
oh, totally.
Yeah.
A
So
100%.
So of course, everything that you have is the entire world. Everything else is like, whether it's something that is valid to something that is completely like charlatan, it's all painted in the same light.
Yes, and I think that there's a tendency within medicine. So you have to understand that like attorneys, they're taught that everything is gray.
Ooh,
Like
I like
truly,
this.
like
I like this.
okay, both of my parents are attorneys, so I'm allowed to say this. They're taught that everything is gray. So in other words, there could be a fight with 2 sides, and they're supposed to be able to take either side.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in medicine, you're told that everything is black and white.
Black and white.
And there's a right and there's a wrong. And if you haven't been taught it, it must be wrong.
It has to be wrong
Right.
and
So,
dangerous.
and there's an arrogance to that. There's an
Yeah.
arrogance to that. There's an elitism to that puts you into a position where there can be thousands of studies.
Mm-hmm.
But if they weren't spoon fed to you during this time, then the assumption is they don't exist. And I'm not actually going to take the time to look. I'm just going to assume that that's trash
Of
because
course.
it wasn't fed to me.
100%. That is so important because for the audience listening, because this particular community that I'm building is specifically for those who are looking for science-based evidence.
Right.
And it's hard to imagine that there's a whole world of science-based evidence that your doctor is not aware of.
Oh, 100%.
It's so hard. It's so hard to imagine it.
Yeah, there's a massive world. There's an absolutely massive world. And So, and I had to cross into that world. And, I think that like I led off by sort of pointing out that this is embedded into my soul and who I am.
Yes.
And that's what propels me to do these things. That's what propelled me to do research, like, at 11 o'clock at night, even though I was working 80 hours a week. And that's also what propelled me in this moment to say, okay, hold on. Like, I'm faced with this choice myself. Now I'm the patient.
Yes.
Is there more out there? What's the root of this problem? My problem is not the deficiency of pills.
Yes. The deficiency of omeprazole.
Yeah, exactly. So is there,
what was your sickness? Just not feeling well, or was it just like I don't feel good itis, or did you have an issue? All right, quick pause. If this episode is hitting home, check out the Medical Disruptor merch. It's not just a shirt, it's a statement. And every piece helps spread the message. You can find it on my website, drefratlamondre.com. Now, back to the episode.
no, I mean, I was like truly, first of all, metabolically out of balance. So 50 pounds overweight, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. So my metabolism was whack. I was suffering with like mood disorders. So truly, I was depressed.
Yeah.
I literally, I think it's hard to relate to unless you've been through it. But during this period of my life, I wanted nothing more than to be in a dark room, laying under a blanket, watching the stupidest television possible.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And now, don't get me wrong. There's times where I still want to do that. That doesn't mean
Yes.
I'm necessarily depressed. But what I'm saying is like, there was no joy.
Yeah. I totally get it. My daughter she's an NP now, but when she did her RN, her first stint, night shift in a city hospital. So no one wants to take care of these patients. She's there front line, gained the 40 pounds, depression, on the medication. And all she wanted to do was stay undercover. It's exactly that. And just watch Love Island. Right. So like,
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
it's a big deal. So, but your point is really interesting because you're describing what many patients feel like. So the only abnormal that you have here, and we didn't even like that we're still in your autobiography here, but the only abnormal that you have is high blood pressure and cholesterol, none of which really explains on a conventional medicine sense why you're depressed. Why, like, there's nothing wrong with you.
Right. And I mean, I had gut issues too. Like I had food intolerances. And
Sure.
can we assign, right? Like you can, as a gastroenterologist, IBS, it is real. Don't get me wrong. It is real. IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, but it's also a cheap diagnosis.
Oh
and
my God.
you can just slap that on any person and be done.
I love you.
And so I think that that's where I was like, I was dealing with these issues. And you're right, like blood work wise, abnormal cholesterol is the only thing that I've pointed out so far. So,
Yeah, which has no connection, which is why you need the antidepressants and all that. Like you're a classic picture of so many of our patients. So I'm imagining you got yourself out of this nutritionally.
clearly, I'm halfway to 90, and I'm in the best shape of my life, and I feel like I've been thriving for many years since the changes.
But you were still in school or in your residency?
I was in my fellowship at the time, so it's such a long track because at medical school was 4 years. My residency was 4 years because I spent an extra year in honor as the chief resident. And then my fellowship was 4 years because I spent an extra year on a grant from the NIH. So it was, here I am, and I'm like, if you include college, I mean, it was 16 years. That's where I was at. I was at the tail end of that.
Wow. And so you're about to go out to practice.
Yeah.
So in addition to your personal transformation, I imagine how you decide to practice medicine changes. So did you, after your fellowship, go into the conventional world, or did you immediately set up shop? Like, what was the professional transformation here?
Yeah, well, so this is an interesting question, and I don't know how relevant it is to being a disruptor per se, other than I didn't feel, after all this work, I had like a quarter life crisis because I had done a ridiculous amount of work to put myself into a position to be this triple threat.
Yeah.
And let me be honest, I looked around and people weren't very happy.
Yeah.
And I sat there and I said, I don't want that.
Wow.
And so I decided to leave. But the problem is, that it's one of these things where in this academic world, when you're there, you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. And the minute you step off the reservation,
You're out.
what happened to you? You're out.
You're out. And if you start
And
talking this stuff, then you're also crazy.
yeah, well, there is some of that as well. That's true. And so, like, I don't think fiber, like to me, it's like wild. Like, how could you say fiber is controversial? It's not.
But you can.
Um, but anyway, I really what I came back to, it was a struggle for me because I knew that I would be unhappy in that world if I were to continue with it. There was absolute tons of social pressure on me to stay and continue.
Wow.
And I
Big.
made the choice to walk because what I wanted was to be with people and patients and get back to like the initial dream of who I was in the beginning,
To take care of people.
to take care of people. And so I went into private practice. But the thing is, so private practice, like now I'm full time as a clinician, and it's
Was
an
it,
opportunity.
was it your spot or someone else's spot?
Well, so we get Dr. E zero education
On how to open up a
on
private
how to
business.
open up a practice or how to do any of this.
Yeah.
We get zero education on how to look for a job and what makes a good job. Literally over 50% of doctors, they don't last with their first practice because no one's teaching them how to look at these things, which I find to be very sad because we should be
Yeah.
caring for these kids. And
Absolutely.
instead, what we do is we put pressure on them to stay within academia, and then if they choose to leave academia, again, you're out. And it's not my problem if things don't go well.
Exactly right. It's so, people cannot imagine how you could be so educated and also not know anything.
Yeah, well, those are real, you're in a bubble, and
Yeah,
those
you're in a
are your
bubble.
bubble is the hospital, and it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with what happens in the real world
It
in
that's
healthcare.
it's really important because sometimes I think the community expects so much from their doctors and they should, but in whatever the doctor has learned. Um, and if you're practicing, you're not doing research. You can't do both. Very hard to do both. If you're doing research, you probably don't have the best bedside manner if you're taking care of patients at all. And if you're setting up your own practice, you're figuring it out like brand new because no one teaches that. And that's a lot. I think sometimes we forget that our medical providers are themselves, little kids that grew up and are figuring it out as they go. Um, are you in someone else's practice or is this your practice when you first get out of fellowship?
So when I first finished fellowship, I took a job with a large practice in Savannah, Georgia, and and it was an opportunity for me to spend a ton of time refining my craft with patients.
Yeah,
So you're because I'm like I'm seeing in this practice, like I don't set the rules, right? So I've
right,
stepped into other people's practice where they have the rules.
right.
And the rules were that we would see 20 or 25 people in a half day. So you can do the math on that because a half day is 4 hours and that's fast.
Yes.
Yet at the same time, um, now I'm in a position where like I've had this life experience where my life has been transformed through the discovery of diet and lifestyle.
So,
And
so
go ahead.
are you practicing now in this way of like, I have to do this really fast, but I have so much to tell you. Like I know
A
more than
hundred
I'm actually,
percent.
that's the worst
A
feeling.
100%. And it was it's not ideal because like if you don't have time, you can't have a really solid discussion on these topics, right? I mean, you and I right now we're already past the amount of time on a visit. So
Yeah, 100%.
um
We're still on your
so
first job.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, but the thing is though, I was compelled to provide this comprehensive care to my patients because it had completely changed my
Yes.
life.
Yes.
So how could I deprive these people that I care about them being well? I'm emotionally invested. Why would I ignore something that changed my life when it could change theirs too?
You're preaching to the choir. This is such a struggle because I still see primary care once a week, which is not functional medicine or integrated medicine. And it is really hard because you know what you know, and you're watching people kind of go through life not knowing this. And there are some patients who don't want to know also, like, let's be frank, some patients are fine the way it is. And also some patients, just getting them to take their meds is already kind of a win. So, but then you have patients who want more and you can't do it in that time. And it's a real struggle. It's like, I really hear that pain. So then am I imagining, tell me if I get this story right. Is the story that eventually this does not work in this practice and you have to kind of leave?
Yeah, I did end up having to leave the practice, and those elements were absolutely a part of it. I will also say that I think that there are, I think this is a theme already for this episode, which is that moments of disappointment have turned out to be massive blessings for me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I did ultimately leave that practice after 2 years. I'd made the choice to not become a partner. I was offered that, but I chose to instead leave.
Yeah. Which is
And
terrifying.
um, and so, and ultimately, though, that led me to Charleston, which is where I live, Charleston, South Carolina. And this is a place where, um, like, it's very competitive in my specialty, gastroenterology. And so when I arrived, I wanted to share this story of like, I think I could change your life with diet and lifestyle. And so I went to the local newspaper, Dr. E. And when I say local newspaper, there's the prestigious one, which is the Post and Courier. That's like the nice Charleston newspaper. And then there's like the local one that everyone gets in their mailbox for free. And
That's the
I
one.
that's the one.
The
And
penny
I went to
saver.
them. Yeah, exactly. And I said to them, "Hey, I think that your readership would enjoy a health and wellness column. I would
What
write
the,
it for you. I would write it for free. You don't even have to pay me. And here are 5 essays that I've written to show you what this would look like."
wow.
So, and I hand this to them, and they're just like, "No,
No, don't be crazy.
not interested." So I was, sort of dejected, and I came home, and my wife says to me, all of those people that you're trying to reach, they're actually online anyway. Like, they're not really reading
Not
that paper.
really.
Yeah. She's like, "Why don't you just go to Instagram?" And I'm like, "Babe, I hate that stuff." Because I was not a Facebook
I
guy. I didn't even
totally
have an
get
Instagram
it.
account. Yeah. I was like, "I don't know." But anyway, I did. And I started sharing the story of what was happening within the walls of my clinic. Obviously, not revealing patient info, but
Sure.
like the story of healing that's occurring, because I thought, like, this is what really needs to be shared out there.
Yeah.
And so, and that is what, like, that was the beginning of where we are today.
Oh my God, I love it. The reluctant, I also, my team was like, you need to go on TikTok. And I was like, first of all, I'm too old for TikTok. This is a few years ago. I was already too old for TikTok. But at that time, right now, our generation's really on TikTok. But at that time, I didn't think really much of our generation's on. We're not the same generation. I'm older than you. And I went on it reluctantly, like you, and just talked about long COVID and expecting absolutely no one to listen. And 800,000 followers later,
Yo,
it's crazy. It's crazy sending this message out. And with no ask, no CTAs, just like informing people so that they know.
yeah.
But, all right, so this is crazy. So then you started your own practice. Instagram is helping you. So now, so this is huge magical disruption. I just want to like before I move on to kind of like let's talk to our audience about. I'm gonna already land on IBS just because you said it, but I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you. Like, so many of our disruptors. So every single one of our disruptors here have been clinically trained, and then something happened in their life. For me, it was my wife's illness, but almost everyone crashes and then leaves. But we have to take a moment to acknowledge what it looks like to leave something you've invested so much time in. Like it almost, like you said, you almost have to get sick because you're so in. I mean, what you've accomplished in those 16 years is huge. Um, and I think in the environment that we're in today, when there's a lot of vilifying of the medical community, we sometimes forget to acknowledge 16 years is a big deal. And a lifelong dream is a big deal. And to have the courage to say, I can't do this anymore and to do something else adjacent. Not, you didn't go off and become, I don't know, a drum player. But it's adjacent.
I wish I did. That'd be fun.
That'd be fun. But it's a big deal. It's a big deal. And there is fear in there. And you're saying it kind of like in a quick way because we're on this podcast, but there are moments when you're like, am I crazy? And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that. So thank you for doing that.
I appreciate you saying that. And I think like two things I'll say real quick. With that, I have to acknowledge my wife, right? Because the issue is we had kids through all of this. I have 4 children. So to take steps outside of a traditional approach where like people need to understand, like I'm like people on the internet who say like you sold out. I'm like, do you know what an average gastroenterologist makes?
Did not sell out.
Right? Do you know what an average gastroenterologist makes? Because that's what I was guaranteed.
Yeah.
And I didn't need to do anything. All I had to do was show up to work, and that's what I would have had.
100%.
And instead, I chose to go in a different direction where there are no guarantees. So I have to acknowledge my wife, who's actually like supported me through this, because it wouldn't have been possible without her.
Yeah, I feel you on that. My wife took the same role for me. Yeah, and and people don't know, like, you now have to be in the space of selling yourself because there are no guarantees. You need to create patience. You need to create, to set up shop. Whereas before, you're right, you would just been clocking in, clocking out, never worrying. This is the opposite of selling out. It really is. So
yeah,
kudos to you. So, wow, this is really good. Thank you for sharing that. So this particular episode, I really want to focus on something that I think will resonate, which is the idea that the patients sometimes have symptoms and everything's normal. All your endoscopy is normal, maybe a little reflux, but everything's normal and not enough to explain how severe and unwell people feel. So tell us how that applies in your world.
Oh, I mean, the number one diagnosis in gastroenterology is irritable bowel syndrome.
Love this.
And it's fascinating to consider that. So first of all, it was my mentor, right? To speak to the training in the place that I came from, it was my mentor, literally my friend, who developed this diagnosis, irritable bowel syndrome.
Wow, no way. That's crazy.
Way back. So basically, here's how this all came to be. This is the history of IBS. Doctors in the 1970s were noticing a pattern of symptoms, and it was a pattern that would come through those doors repeatedly. But there is no name for that pattern.
Oh my God.
And so eventually, my mentor, Dr. Doug Drossman from the University of North Carolina, who recently retired, an incredible person, he created something called the Rome Foundation. And the Rome Foundation was basically a group of doctors that went to Rome, Italy. They sat down, they said, we're all seeing the same thing. What do we call it? And let's create rules so that people can actually start to address this problem. So they created for the first time the diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome.
It's crazy.
And now that was in the late 1980s that they started that. And so fast forward, here we are. Right. And 40 years later, there's about 20% of America has this condition. Right. So 350 million people, you can do the math on that, divide it by 5. And like we're talking about, a lot of people here. So I'm
glad that neither one of us could do that math quickly. That's great.
Yeah, on the spot. I used to be good at math. Anyway, despite that, like 40 years, tons of people, every single day, clinics across the globe, and yet we don't have a test for this. It continues to be a pattern of symptoms. There's no test to prove that person does or doesn't have this.
And I just want to make sure we're all landing on the same place, that as part of the criteria for this, it should be the absence of any positive findings anywhere, right? So like you have a patient who has, everything is fine. Their labs will be fine. Their endoscopy will be relatively fine. Their colonoscopy will be fine, or any other test that GI World does. But yet they still have persistent symptoms. Is that kind of the crux of it?
Yeah, that's the crux of it, because the issue is that you could come in, like a person could come in and have symptoms that you're like, oh, that's classic irritable bowel syndrome. And it turns out to be celiac disease.
Sure.
Or it turns out to be sucrase intolerance.
Fair.
And like, so there's these other things that can exist. So we have to call it a diagnosis of exclusion, which is
Yeah.
to get to it, you have to do appropriate testing to rule out the other possibilities.
Yes. You actually brought up a really good point that I didn't think to surface, which is like, don't diagnose yourself with IBS just because you fit the patterns. Make sure you get all the testing, everyone listening. Make sure you get all the testing to make sure it's not something else. And then when it's all negative, take a moment to celebrate. Great, I don't have celiac. Great, I don't have anything else going on. And then you land on IBS. This is really
Yeah,
important.
because it is important because the issue is that if you go and put that on your chart, right? You go in and you say to your doctor, I have IBS. They're going to write that on your chart and then it's going to be with you forever.
Yeah,
But the problem is many times doctors don't step back to challenge the diagnosis that's on paper,
right.
to ask the question like, have we done the appropriate testing to get to this point?
They
So this
assume,
was one of the things that I used to see a lot, actually, Dr. E, because I have taken care of so many fourth opinions, fifth opinions. I kind of became that guy.
yeah,
And one of the things that I would do to try to like get people better is challenge the diagnosis that they think that they have, because many times it was wrong.
yeah. So was it wrong because you went and you redid the testing just to make sure nothing else was there? Or was it wrong? Was probably the answer is yes to both. Or was it wrong because you're like, I'm not accepting this diagnosis of IBS? And
No, I'll accept a diagnosis of IBS if I'm wholeheartedly on board and have proven from my perspective that it is irritable bowel syndrome. But the issue is that many times a person gets diagnosed with IBS and it's premature. You
get
haven't
into it.
you haven't done all the testing,
I love this.
right? So, and like for example, celiac disease, it's quite common practice to give a person antibody testing,
Right.
right? And then the antibody test is negative, and you go, well, you don't have celiac disease. Okay, but here's the problem. I had a bazillion patients and take biopsies of their small intestine. And what it would show was basically like early celiac disease. And so the serologies, meaning the antibody tests, weren't positive yet.
Didn't catch up yet.
But if you put that person on a gluten-free diet, all of their symptoms went away.
Yep.
And so did the changes that we found on the biopsies. So like, how can you say that that's not real?
100%. Plus, I don't want to get into celiac and like the spectrum of gluten sensitivity, but
It's a complex topic.
It's what's that?
It's a very complex topic.
It's a very complex topic. But let's just land for this, that sometimes, and this is true for rheumatological issues too, the labs sometimes get positive much later in the disease.
That's right.
So the absence of a positive lab does not mean you're not in the state of pre-disease or early disease. And the labs, like with diabetes, labs are late markers. You're already diseased for a long time. We just don't have a pre-diabetes or pre-disease testing for many of our diseases. So that's really fascinating. So now, okay, so the doctor, oh my God, let me say this again. The patient came to you. They said IBS. You did all the testing. You made sure that everything. They truly, truly, truly have IBS.
Yes.
But now we kind of know that IBS just means absence of pathology in conventional medicine. And now this is the time for us to open up our other toolbox and say, but what's actually causing your symptoms, right? So
100%.
So what I'm loving here, and for anyone listening, is like your symptoms really, really, really count, even if everything's negative. Make sure you do all the testing. But if it's negative, that does not mean you're okay. It means you're in the wrong room. Say thank you to your GI. He or she did all the tests. And now you need to find someone like Dr. B. And what's the next thing that you're going to do? How are we getting rid of these symptoms?
Well, I think what could be helpful is for us to break down what is IBS,
Yeah, oh, yes, that'd be helpful.
right? Like what's causing this, right? So you have to understand that these people, first of all, the pattern of symptoms is that they have abdominal discomfort. They have a change in bowel habits. So it's not just discomfort, it's also a change in bowel habits. And in the vast majority of cases, their discomfort changes based upon whether or not they have a bowel movement. Usually it gets better after a bowel movement, but sometimes in some people it gets worse. All right. So that's irritable bowel syndrome in terms of the pattern. And so now, where is that coming from? Because I think where it's coming from explains why we don't have a test, despite 40 years,
Love this.
to prove that a person does or does not have IBS. So, and we have to start with the gut microbiome because to me, this is a condition that actually does begin in the gut microbiome, where we have in our colon 38 trillion microbes, and they are there with a purpose. They help us to digest our food. They also affect the motility of our intestines, and they create bioactives. So bioactives, basically what I'm saying is that your food goes in your mouth one way, comes into contact with your microbes in your colon, and then is transformed into something different that has physiologic effects on your body,
Love this.
including on your nerves and your brain. So irritable bowel syndrome is once again beginning with the gut microbes, but it ends up extending all the way up to your brain. This is what we would call a disorder of the gut-brain axis, where because the microbes are unwell, that is going to ultimately affect the nerves lining your intestines. So your intestines are completely carpeted with nerves. And we call that the enteric nervous system. And those nerves, they're all feeling and sensing, collecting information. As we sit here and we talk to one another, we have literally hundreds of millions of nerves feeling and sensing. And that information all gets consolidated into a pair of nerves called the vagus nerves. There's two of them. And they travel all the way from your gut, collecting information and sending it directly to your brain. This is a nerve that connects directly to your brain. And that vagus nerve is basically like giving your brain feedback on what are the things that are happening within your gut. So when our microbes are out of balance, it affects those nerves. They become hypersensitive. We start feeling things that we shouldn't feel. They start reacting to things that they shouldn't react to. We feel pain when there really shouldn't be any pain. We call that visceral hypersensitivity. And the other thing that happens is that your rhythm falls out of whack.
Your peristalsis rhythm?
Your peristalsis rhythm falls out of whack. So when your gut rhythm, because your intestines are 15 or 20 feet long and they're moving constantly. We don't have good tests other than perhaps the esophagus. We don't have good tests to measure the way in which your intestines move because they're constantly going all day, every day. So how do you measure that? But when the microbiome gets disrupted, so does the way in which your intestines move, your motility. And if it goes too fast, you get diarrhea. And if it goes too slow, you get constipation. And so basically what I've just laid out to you is that on a microscopic level, abnormal microbes, abnormal motility, abnormal nerve function, meaning visceral hypersensitivity, and those three things ultimately manifest in a real person like you and I with discomfort and a change in bowel habits. But you can't really measure the changes in the microbiome. We don't have a test for that yet. You can't measure the changes in motility. We don't have a test for that yet. You can't measure the changes in these nerves. They're microscopic and there's hundreds of millions of them. We don't have a test for that. So here we are, and all we have is the pattern of symptoms.
Oh
Mic
my
drop.
God. I love this explanation so much. This is because, I've heard IBS explained so many ways. This is so beautiful. And I just got like such a really cool image of so many things. And it also cleared up some things for me. And it's the first thing I want to do is say it back, if that's okay.
Please.
Because you almost describe like this alien looking, right, thing that lives inside of us. Because I try to create visuals. So you have this intestines. We just think of this intestines as this tube, like from your mouth to your anus, and just the food gets processed like in this like delivery system. And it's so much more complex. This idea of these constant nerves that are constantly also through the vagus nerves talking to our brain. We already know about the gut brain connection, but just to really understand that structurally on like pipes are connecting these things is really important for everyone to understand, because that's why when your belly's off, from besides the pain, it's why you also have mood issues, because it's constantly sending these like signals. But then to understand that on top of all this structure is kind of this layer of soil, your microbiome, which if it's not on point is what's affecting these structural things, is a fascinating way to look at it. And the other part of it is the testing, because you're right, on endoscopy, we could see some motility issues. Sometimes you could see right in the moment of you doing endoscopy, right? You could see like, we didn't have a wave during this process. But it also clears up some people who, it clears up some testing because I know we look for like complete motility issues, like, if somebody has like gastroparesis or, and then, so that's a complete issue. And then, but it's not really that black and white. We're back to black and white. You can be in and out of this. You can have one day your utility's fine and your bathroom's fine. And then some days your utility's on hyperdrive and you're in a bathroom, and some days, and that's why, right, it's IBS D or IBS C, or some days are normal. But this idea that it's undulating, it's constantly changing because of, excuse me, of course, this idea that it's undulating and constantly changing because of what's happening in the microbiome explains so much of the variability in the symptoms. It's mind-blowing, honestly.
Yeah, no, it's and like, so if we take that framework, right, then what we've done is we've identified the opportunities to get at the root of the issue, which include the microbiome, which include gut motility, and which include the sensitivity of these nerves. So if we want to get serious about attacking this issue, don't cover the symptoms with pills. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm totally opposed to pills or a symptoms-based approach. What I'm saying is, like, that's not actually going to fix the root of the issue. So you'll just be on those pills in perpetuity.
Of course. So now you're going to take some omeprazole because you have some reflux, which has its own problem because it's affecting your microbiome.
Oh, 100%.
Because it's changing like the acidic nature of the soil. I'm just going to go with soil for this one. And then you're stuck in its own loop, right? How do you get people off omeprazole is a whole other issue. So this is amazing. So what's your next step? So they have IBS. Now we know there's a microbiome issue. So is your next step then to focus on the microbiome?
Yeah. So what I've discovered through the years, and again, this goes back to and started really just with me and finding something that would work for me. But what I've discovered is that if you can heal the microbiome, then these health conditions, they like eventually drift off and go away.
Yes.
And because this is these three parts, microbiome and motility and nerve sensitivity, actually, they come back to the microbiome. Because if you properly nurture the microbiome, then the microbes actually help you to restore gut motility on their own. And they also reduce the sensitivity of these nerves and like get the brain gut axis working in alignment once again. So really, that's where the opportunity exists. If you heal the gut, you're going to heal the condition.
Absolutely. So what is your move? What do you like to do? Change nutrition?
Yeah. So my first book is called Fiber Fueled. And the reason why is because if people told me when I wanted to write this book that fiber is boring and it'll never sell. And okay, you must not be looking at the studies that I'm looking at. Because the idea of 1980s fiber, which is the orange drink that grandma had so that she could poop, that's the old view of fiber. The new view of fiber is like sexy and attractive because it actually is it's the microbiome feeding nutrient. And here we are, Dr. E, and 95% of America is not even just mildly deficient. We are wildly deficient in fiber.
Wildly deficient. No one eats fiber.
No one eats fiber. Even the people that think they eat fiber, they're still deficient. And so we're just not where we need to be with regard to this specific nutrient. And this is the essential nutrient to support our gut microbiome because they're as alive as you and I are. It's hard for us to understand this because we can't see them. But if you looked under a microscope, you would see them and you would understand they're as alive as you and I are. They have personalities. They have cliques, specific microbes that they like to hang out with. They have certain skill sets. Some of them are carpenters. Some of them are mechanics. Like they do different things.
Love this.
And some of them, like some of them are nice. Some are kind of nasty.
Yep.
Okay. So these microbes, they're a lot like us. The difference is it's a microscopic ecosystem living inside of us. So, but it's an ecosystem and they're as alive as you and I are. And so what happens when you and I starve? We lose our energy, we grow weak, we become incapable of focus, and we're no longer able to do our job because we can't really do anything until you recharge us with some food.
Sure.
Our microbes are starving.
Absolutely.
We might be overweight and obese in America, but our microbes are starving.
Yes.
And because fiber is the thing that feeds these microbes. So if you want to rebuild and restore the microbiome, you start by feeding them. And fiber is the key. And nutrition should be the number one way in which we do this. Our diet should be the number one way in which we do this. That being said, I would be remiss to ignore the fact that 95% of people who would come through the doors of my clinic, on their first visit, I would put them on a fiber supplement.
Wow, that's a lot for some people's gut right away on a fiber supplement.
Well, so if I'm convinced that you have a microbiome-based disease, then I want to address that issue and I want to
Right.
put ourselves into a position to be successful.
I love that.
And as a gastroenterologist, it's very rare for a person to come through the doors of a gastroenterologist and not have a microbiome-based disease,
Of course.
right? So to me, it really starts with even the people who are on a high plant, whole food, plant-based diet. Dr. E, you wouldn't believe it because these people, they came and they sought me out because they knew that I was interested in that dietary approach, and yet they weren't better. They were trying to figure it out. Many of
That's a
those
really
people,
good point because all they do is potentially eat plants.
they do, and many of these people, they continue to suffer, and it's a problem because that actually, for a lot of people, negatively affects their desire to continue with that dietary pattern. When in fact, that dietary pattern, like it might be an optimal pattern, but there's other stuff that we can
Right.
work on. It's not the only thing.
Right.
And so, yeah, so fiber supplements, even for them, can like really be difference making.
Yeah. That's a really important point. And I know, my goodness, we're already at an hour, but this is such a fascinating topic. First, I like to think of just in general how we feed our microbiome as like you have to feed the fish in your aquarium. So like you have to sprinkle in the food. And I love fiber as that. But you also bring up a really good point in that for the people who are like they're eating all the right things and they're still what they think is the right thing and they're still not well, and so they consider coming off of that. And I think people really lock into it has to be this one thing, and if that one thing doesn't work, then I should just let it go. But it's not one thing, it's several things. So you have this locked in and you still have symptoms. You don't let go of that. You have to layer on to the next thing. And that's really important. And that kind of brings us back to like symptoms and symptom tracking, because if you have a whole list of your symptoms and then maybe one thing gets better with this intervention, but the other things didn't get better, that's okay. Keep that and add another intervention and maybe the next symptom will go away, right? So we have to go piece by piece. I imagine that you have the same experience.
Yeah, there's different levers that you can pull.
Yeah.
And so what we're describing are just like the initial levers that are often a fit. And the reason why they're often a fit is because frankly, most of America not doing these things. But if you were doing these things, it doesn't mean that's wrong. It just means that there's other things for us to work on. And actually my new book, which is coming out in January called Plant Powered Plus, people want to hear like what to eat. So of course I'm going to teach them that, what to eat. But actually, I'm incredibly proud of about half of the book being not related to nutrition at all,
Love this.
because there's so many other levers that we can pull that people should be pulling. And I think that like the way that I would describe this is that our body, we evolved 99.999% of human history predated what we currently live in. And, living in America and the culture and the lifestyle is completely disconnected from our biology.
Yes.
And that's causing massive issues from us on a health perspective. And that's not just a nutrition thing. That's also like living inside of a house with air conditioning and cleaning your home with all these chemicals and putting certain stuff on your body when you shower and not stepping outside for 97% of the day. Like all of these different factors, they pile up. So I'm proud of the fact that in my brand new book, there's a huge conversation, multiple different chapters, where we're digging into these other topics that include circadian rhythm, time-restricted eating, the importance of sleep, the importance
So
of
good.
morning routine, actually perhaps my favorite chapter, to be totally honest with you, is where we stop talking about like, rational thought and human consciousness, and we actually step outside of that into the non-conscious mind, where things like trauma
Yes.
and stress can manifest.
Yes.
And through the vagus nerve, we're back to the vagus nerve again, because this is the brain gut interaction that actually is essential to these things that I'm describing right now. Through the vagus nerve, a history of trauma or active stress in your life can actually be massively gut disrupting.
So this is so good. And, in a moment, I'm going to switch us over to kind of recap and next steps. And I really want you back here when your book comes out. We want to promote it. We want to make sure it gets in everyone's hands. So make sure we come back to that. But I just have to say this thing, because in the years I've been doing this, the difference between, and tell me if this resonates for you, the difference between someone who's just starting out on this journey, providers, versus someone who's been doing this for a while, is exactly that piece. So when we all start out, we're like, oh, I could just fix the gut. And if I just fix the microbiome, it's going to be awesome. And then you add more levers. But ultimately, we land in this nonverbal kind of what happened to your energy, whether you're dealing with heart rate variability, whether you're dealing with trauma, or whether you're dealing with connecting to source. But if you're not dealing with this subconscious or unconscious area of health, you're actually not seeing the whole picture. And I'm loving that you just surfaced that, because I think that's the difference of someone who's just starting this journey and someone who's been doing it for a while.
There's people, so actually, credit, I've brought his name up already in this episode, Dr. Doug Drossman, my mentor. He's the one who taught me this. And basically what I've learned is that there are people who are doing everything right. They're following the diet that I prescribe in my books. They are exercising and sleeping, and they're doing all the stuff. They're not getting better, and they want to know why. And what I often discover, I know that you can appreciate this, Dr. E. It takes a couple visits. You're never going to do this the first visit, but you grow a trusting relationship with a person where they're willing to share vulnerable parts of themselves.
Yes.
And then what you discover is that there's something there. It could be something from the past, and they don't want to talk about it. Why? Because it hurts. It's painful. Like, they've buried that as deep as they can bury it. But the problem is that you can't bury it and make it go away.
Correct.
It's there. It's active. It's actually activating your sympathetic nervous system 24 hours a day. And until it's properly addressed and healed, it's going to continue to be disruptive. And these people, when you actually, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not the person who actually administers the care for that specific issue. I'm the one who makes the connection for them.
Yes.
What you're experiencing on a physical level is connected to something that happened to you a very long time ago that you're not consciously thinking about. But this is continuing to cause problems for you in your non-conscious mind. And when they actually go and address that issue, it's the most incredible thing to watch, because it's like a rocket ship taking off, because they have been chained down by this issue.
100%.
And when you release that chain, they take off.
Oh, that is such a good metaphor. I love that. Okay, so as we're coming to the close of this amazing, impactful episode, we speak primarily to women and marginalized communities, because generally speaking, they tend to be most dismissed in the medical system. I don't think it's done with malice. I think it's just systemic in how we listen to some people in our population. So what do you want women to understand about trusting their gut patterns, even when testing is normal?
If you don't feel well, you deserve to feel well. And you shouldn't be discouraged by one doctor or by conventional healthcare that may not be adequately providing what you need. I want to encourage you to continue to advocate for yourself, educate yourself, empower yourself, so that you can have meaningful interactions with healthcare providers of many varieties. And what I would encourage you to do is to build a team of healthcare providers. So that can come from many different backgrounds. People have different areas of expertise. And build that team and let them work with you to lift you up, but also empower yourself so that you can ask good questions.
Yes. I love that idea. That's one of our pillars, building the team. Keep your PCP, keep your GI, and then get Dr. B and other providers and make a team, and each one of them can bring their strengths. Because your functional nutritional health coach is not going to be able to do your endoscopy, right? So you need everyone. You need everyone on the team. I love this so much. Make sure everyone to go buy, what is the name of the book?
So my new book is called Plant Powered Plus, and again, the book is not just about eating plants. It's also it's actually quite flexible, quite inspired by the Mediterranean diet, and it's also about all these other elements that I'm excited to discuss. And the book comes out January 13th. But if you pre-order the book and you come to my website, theguthealthmd.com, then you will find that I have pre-order incentives that I'm eager to share. And then even then, come to my website, theguthealthmd.com, sign up for my email newsletter, which is a completely free resource, and take the gut quiz, because it's kind of fun and interesting. The gut quiz, based upon the questions, I can assign one of 8 different gut types, so you find out which one you have, and then I have some tips and tricks for each one.
Ooh, that is amazing. We're absolutely going to link that. That is cool. I love that. But of course, when you know your type, you still have to get all the testing done. Don't forget all your testing done.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a diagnosis. I can't give you a simple quiz and then actually give you a diagnosis. But what I can do is I can give you insights based upon the pattern of what you're experiencing, because a lot of what we deal with in gastroenterology, it's symptoms, and it's identifying the symptoms and understanding where they're coming from.
I love that so much. I just had to say it just in case, you never know.
Oh, for sure.
Dr. B, thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you, Dr. Ian. Thank you, everyone else, for being a part of this episode with us.
Thank you. Well, that's another episode of the Medical Disruptor. What Dr. B showed us today is that your patterns matter. They matter so much. Your food responses are valid. Your symptoms are real information, even when standard testing comes back normal. Trust those observations while seeking providers who understand the complexity of gut health. It's not just about normal testing. And this is what medical disruption looks like. Not blaming, but exposing the limits of the training and pushing the conversation forward. You're part of a community that doesn't exist anywhere else. A safe space for people who want real scientific information, but also want to ask questions without being made to feel crazy. Our community is informed, empowered, and science-backed. If you're ready to go deeper, go to my website, drlamandre.com, has my book, my PDFs, newsletters, and a link for consults. Until then, keep asking questions, keep asking for more, and keep disrupting.